The night the coldest millionaire in the city finally broke down, no one recognized the man sitting alone on the floor of his own mansion. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hands were trembling, and beside him lay a tiny pink hair clip that cost less than a cup of coffee. He had spent 43 years believing that money could solve every problem and that emotions were weaknesses reserved for people who could afford to lose. Yet that little hair clip had become more powerful than every dollar in his bank accounts, because it belonged to the one person who had managed to reach a part of his heart he had buried long ago. For years, people called Adrian Vale the coldest millionaire in the city. He owned luxury hotels, office towers, restaurants, and investment companies, but none of his employees had ever seen him smile without a reason connected to business. He rejected charity invitations, refused personal favors, ignored birthday celebrations, and never allowed anyone to become emotionally close to him. Women who admired his wealth quickly discovered that expensive dinners and designer gifts meant nothing to him. Friends eventually stopped inviting him anywhere. Even his own family had learned not to expect warmth from him. Adrian had built a wall around his heart so high that eventually even he forgot what was on the other side. But if you believe that kindness can change a broken heart, if you believe people deserve second chances, and if you believe that sometimes the person who needs help the most is the one who looks strongest, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories of kindness, courage, and second chances to people who need them. Adrian's mansion stood on a hill overlooking the city, surrounded by tall iron gates, perfectly trimmed gardens, and silent fountains. Every room was designed to impress visitors, yet Adrian rarely invited anyone inside. His bedroom was enormous but almost completely empty. His dining table could seat 12 people, but he usually ate alone at one end. His living room contained paintings worth millions, but there were no family photographs, no children's toys, no souvenirs from vacations, and no small objects that carried sentimental value. Everything was beautiful, expensive, and lifeless. People assumed Adrian had always been like that. They were wrong. 25 years earlier, Adrian had been a different man. He had been 24, ambitious, hopeful, and deeply in love with his younger sister, Clara. She was the only person who could make him laugh when life became difficult. Their parents had died unexpectedly when Adrian was young, and Clara had become the person he protected with everything he had. When Adrian started building his first business, Clara supported him from a tiny apartment, celebrating every small success as if it were a fortune. Then one winter evening, everything changed. Clara became seriously ill. Adrian had been traveling constantly, chasing contracts and trying to save a struggling company. He kept promising himself that he would slow down after the next deal, after the next payment, after the next expansion. But life did not wait for his schedule. Clara's condition worsened, and by the time Adrian understood how serious it was, she was already in the hospital. He arrived too late. Her death destroyed something inside him. But instead of grieving, Adrian blamed himself. He convinced himself that attachment made people weak and that caring too deeply only created opportunities for pain. He buried himself in work. He became richer every year, but colder every year too. 20 years later, that philosophy had become his identity. On a freezing Monday morning, Adrian arrived at Vale Enterprises just after 7. The building's glass walls reflected the gray winter sky, and employees moved through the lobby with quiet nervousness whenever he appeared. Everyone knew that Adrian had scheduled an unexpected meeting with department managers. No one knew why. Upstairs, he reviewed reports with his chief financial officer, Martin. The company had lost a major client because of an administrative mistake, and Adrian wanted someone held responsible. Martin presented the details carefully, expecting Adrian to demand immediate punishment. Instead, Adrian simply looked at the report and said that the employee responsible should be terminated. Martin hesitated. The employee was a junior administrative assistant named Elena Brooks, a 34-year-old single mother who had been with the company for nearly 3 years. Adrian knew nothing about Elena. He knew only that an error had cost the company money. By 9 o'clock, Elena was standing outside his office holding a thin folder against her chest. She had arrived at work that morning exhausted after spending most of the night caring for her 8-year-old daughter, Lily, who had been sick with a fever. Elena had barely slept. Her apartment rent was already several days late, the electricity bill sat unopened on the kitchen counter, and there were only a few groceries left in the refrigerator. She had considered calling in sick, but she could not afford to lose even one day of work. Her shoes were slightly worn, her brown coat had been repaired at the sleeve, and her hair was tied back simply because she had no time to style it. Yet she walked into Adrian's office with quiet dignity. She did not know that her entire life was about to change. Adrian looked at her file and then at her. He explained that the company had suffered because of her mistake and that the decision had already been made. Elena listened silently. She could have begged. She could have cried. She could have explained that she had been distracted because her daughter was sick. She could have told him that losing her job would mean losing their apartment. She could have told him that Lily had already asked that morning whether they could afford groceries. But she did none of those things. Instead, Elena took a slow breath and accepted the decision with a quiet sadness that surprised Adrian. She thanked him for the opportunity she had been given and asked whether she could collect her personal belongings. Adrian expected anger. He expected tears. He expected begging. What he saw instead was dignity. That moment stayed with him. Elena returned to her desk and carefully placed her belongings into a small cardboard box. A framed photograph of Lily went in first. Then a notebook, a coffee mug, a few pens, and a tiny green plant she had kept alive for almost 3 years. Her co-workers watched silently. Some looked away because they were embarrassed. Others whispered that she deserved better. Elena held the box against her chest and walked toward the elevator. Adrian happened to be standing near the glass wall overlooking the lobby when he saw her leave. For reasons he could not explain, he followed. He watched from several steps behind as Elena walked through the enormous lobby toward the glass entrance. Outside, cold rain was falling. She stopped for a moment, looked down at the photograph of her daughter inside the box, and closed her eyes. She was trying not to cry. Then she walked outside. Adrian stood behind the glass doors. He could have called her back. He did not. But something inside him had shifted. Later that afternoon, Adrian returned home and found himself thinking about Elena's face. He tried to bury the memory beneath financial reports, emails, and phone calls, but it remained. For the first time in years, he wondered whether he had made a mistake. That evening, Elena returned to her small apartment with the cardboard box still in her arms. The apartment was modest but clean. There was a tiny kitchen, an old sofa, 2 chairs, and a narrow hallway leading toward Lily's bedroom. Elena placed the box on the table and looked at the bills scattered across the counter. She opened her wallet. There was barely enough cash for groceries. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from her landlord reminding her about the overdue rent. Elena sat down. For several seconds, she simply stared at the wall. Then she noticed Lily standing quietly in the doorway. The little girl had been watching her mother. Elena quickly wiped her eyes and smiled. She did not want Lily to see fear. She did not want her daughter to believe that their world was falling apart. So she hugged her tightly and promised that everything would be okay. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Elena sat at the kitchen table surrounded by bills. She calculated the money she had left and the expenses she needed to cover. The numbers did not work. Not even close. She applied for jobs online until nearly 2 in the morning. She sent resumes to restaurants, offices, hotels, clinics, and small businesses. Most required experience she did not have. Some offered salaries too low to cover childcare. Others never responded. By the end of the week, Elena had received nothing. Meanwhile, Adrian's curiosity grew. He ordered Martin to investigate the circumstances behind the administrative mistake that had cost the company money. The report arrived the next morning. Adrian expected confirmation that Elena had been careless. Instead, he discovered something completely different. The error had not been Elena's fault. A senior manager had changed the numbers after Elena submitted the final documents. Security footage showed Elena warning the manager that something looked incorrect. The manager had dismissed her concerns. Elena had been blamed because she was the easiest person to blame. Adrian stared at the footage in silence. He watched Elena carrying her box through the lobby again. This time, he saw something he had missed before. She had not walked away because she did not care. She had walked away because she had been humiliated and had decided she would rather struggle than beg. Adrian immediately ordered an internal investigation. The senior manager was suspended. The company corrected the records. But none of that made Adrian feel better. He knew he had personally fired an innocent woman. He could have sent money. He could have offered her another position. But Adrian had spent his entire life believing that money fixed everything. For the first time, he wondered whether money was actually the least important thing he could give someone. He drove to Elena's neighborhood that evening. He had no plan. He simply wanted to see how she was doing. He found her outside a small grocery store, counting coins in her hand. Lily stood beside her holding a tiny packet of crackers. Elena looked at the price tag, then at the coins. She quietly put the crackers back. Adrian watched from inside his car. Something broke inside him. He remembered Clara. He remembered how his sister had once counted coins to buy him a birthday cake when they were young. He remembered her smiling proudly despite having almost nothing. The memory hit him with such force that Adrian had to close his eyes. For 20 years, he had believed that Clara's death taught him not to love. But perhaps it had taught him something else. Perhaps he had simply been too afraid to learn it. The next morning, Adrian arrived at Vale Enterprises earlier than usual. He called Martin into his office and instructed him to find Elena. But when Martin asked whether Adrian wanted her rehired, Adrian paused. He realized he did not want to help her because he felt guilty. He wanted to help because she deserved fairness. So he asked Martin